Welcome to another episode of Find Your Free, the podcast. I am your hostess, Rachel Voss, and here we are at episode 19. Beautiful alignment because I am recording this on Monday, April 19th, so 19 on the 19th. Tomorrow is April 20th, hashtag 420, so shout out to the plant medicine tribe, those who may use plant medicine, support plant medicine, honor plant medicine. Shout out to you. So let's go ahead and get right into it. My family and I, so my family being David and Voss, our son, have had a lot of life happening behind the scenes, all good things, but we are at a place where we're having to make some, big decisions concerning ourselves as a unit. And so, again, all good things, but my mind has been completely in that space. And so when I realized oh shit, I got to record because recording seems to come around faster and faster. I don't know if it's just me, but it really feels like life is moving at just an extra second or two, faster. I don't know. But anyway, so I'm like, damn, I got to record today. I really didn't have a place to go to. And so I've shared before that, I may have a thought or, I may hear something that kind of triggers an idea of what I want to record. And although the conversation itself may not come together until I'm actually sitting in front of the mic, I will have a place that I want to go to. But today, I was just I'm not sure. So anyway, I woke up a little bit earlier than usual and the podcast was on my mind and did a meditation or tried to. Today was a struggle meditation and that's just human. You have some days where your meditation is just on point. You're totally in the moment, present, not distracted. You're just there, chakras all aligned, all that good stuff. And then there are days where it's just the flight of the bumblebee in your mind. And my mind was a little bit like that this morning, but I sat with it. I sat with the meditation that I selected to listen to and made sure I got through it, even though I was definitely itching and moving and, doing all of that. But after that meditation, the idea came to me, this might be a good episode to share some resources because the meditation I listened to, the guided meditation I listened to was from Tara Brach, who I absolutely adore. And I think I mentioned her on just the last episode or maybe the episode before that. But thinking about how Tara Brach's meditations are a resource for me, I thought this might be a good episode to share some of the resources that I've used, during this path of spiritual growth and development, during this path of becoming and growing as a yoga teacher and entrepreneur, just all of that. And so I was it might be cool to share some of what has gotten me, along the way up until this point. And if I could have, I would have pulled down the entire bookshelf. I'm oh my God, I could use this. And I'm Rachel, stay focused. So what I decided to do was to pull books from various stages of my life. And then when I organized them, to go through them, I organized them from the beginning, what was kind of the first book, or the first resource that came into my life and kind of got the wheels spinning in a different way. And then moving through my journey, from there. And so, my life, I feel has constantly been this path of spiritual growth and development. It just took me a really long time to catch up with that and to realize that, right? So I shared in, I'm pretty sure the first episode, or some episode along the way, I was born to a Baptist mom, and I, grew up going to church, and then, sort of began to question not my role in the church, because it's not my role, but just kind of my relationship with the church, right? And was there really that connection? And, and then I started exploring Islam, and I was a Muslim for a while. So, and all of these things until I found this path of yoga, and what came with that. So my life has always sort of been like that, but this is, again, some of the resources that I've used from, say, 10, 12 years ago until now. And so some books I may just mention the title and the author, and then some books I just will not be able to help myself with doing a little deep dive. So let's go ahead. You may hear me shuffling around because I have the books piled up next to me. So I'm just going to like pull the books from the pile, put them back, all that stuff. So if you hear just little rumblings behind the scene, that's all that is. So first book, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I'm not sure of how to pronounce his last name. I've heard it, and even though I've heard it and I've practiced it, every time I actually have to say it, I think I'm messing it up. The Alchemist, The Alchemist, The Alchemist. Paulo Coelho. First name is Paulo, last name is Coelho. But if you are listening to this podcast, I'm almost willing to bet you've heard of this book, or you've read this book, or you've read this book 10 times. So The Alchemist is a book that actually came into my life not too long after I first moved to Maryland, because I remember either receiving a copy or being told about it. I think I received a copy, like a friend's copy, when I was still in my very first apartment I moved into when I moved to Maryland. And I lived in that apartment between 2000 and 2003, God, forever ago. And I can distinctly remember the conversation around that book, like in my little dining, kitchenette, area. I distinctly remember the setting. I remember the conversation, and I remember being like, oh, so like, what's the big deal? Like, I always loved reading, I was definitely like a bibliophobe growing up, but like, when it came to, I like to read what I like to read, social justice fiction, Mary Higgins Clark, everything. Rest in peace, Mary Higgins Clark. I think she passed last year or 2019. But I loved Mary Higgins Clark, murder mysteries, stuff like that. So, The Alchemist is being presented to me in more of kind of like this, spiritual kind of, opening your mind kind of thing. And I'm like 4, maybe 3, 4 at the time. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, like, when's the party? So anyway, but I remember the conversation around that. And it's funny when I talk about The Alchemist with other people who have read The Alchemist, a lot of people have had this very same experience of the book coming into their life like multiple times before they finally were like, okay, you know what? I'm going to read this. So that was my first introduction to it. And then I would just hear about it. And then, again, it'd be like, hey, did you read this? Have you read? You should read this. And I just was kind of like, all right, I'll get to it. And in the space of it being introduced to me, I remember that very first conversation when I was told about the book. It was like, the person was like, it might not make sense at first. You're going to be like, where is this book going? And, I don't get it. And then all of a sudden you're going to be like, oh, okay. And so that stuck with me, because when I finally sat down to read this book, and I couldn't tell you, I'd have to really contemplate when was like the moment when I first sat down and read it, but definitely somewhere between 2008 and 2010 for sure. Because I remember David and I started dating in 2010, and I told him about it, I think, in like 2011. So anyway, so probably somewhere between that time, I finally sat down to read it. And I absolutely had that experience. Like at first it was like, where's this book going? I don't get it, and then it just got to this point, the crystal shop for all those who read it, where I was like, oh, okay, I think I get it. And then eventually it just began to really unfold in this really beautiful way. And it was like, oh, beautiful. So that book, the thing I love about The Alchemist is like, it kind of tricks you in a really cool way into, and this is if you're not already coming to it with the space of awareness. If you're like searching for quote unquote awareness, spiritual growth, stuff like that. And I don't mean quote unquote in a bad way. I'm just using awareness as kind of like the general umbrella from what I'm talking about, but, or for what I'm talking about. But like, if you came into the place kind of already thinking about who you are and being present and your connection to the universe, like The Alchemist might already make sense. But if you're kind of searching for purpose, The Alchemist has this beautiful way of just sort of easing you into like really thinking about purpose in a much sort of bigger way, or it helps you start to connect with like okay, this is what I'm trying to do. This is where I'm trying to go. This is what I'm feeling. Because when I finally read it, I was in that place of like, what is my purpose? Like, what am I doing? And I could not figure it out. And it's not that The Alchemist gave me all of the answers, but it gave me a really, just like a great foundation, or like just a great understanding of like when you want something in your heart, you know what I mean? And like working towards manifesting that thing and making that thing a reality, and how the universe conspires, you know, to bring you that thing that you truly want to manifest, and how things that happen along the way seem coincidental, but really they're not. And so I'll end up giving the whole book away. So I'm going to stop there. But, yeah. And so The Alchemist is one of my absolute favorite books. I have what I call a literary crush on Paulo Coelho, and another author who's going to come along shortly. The Alchemist, I don't know if this statistic is still stands, but it stood for a while in the world, was the #2 best-selling book behind the Bible. Like, that's how amazing this book is. And Paulo Coelho, I believe he's from Brazil. He was like born in Brazil, and life has now taken him to, I want to say he's in like Switzerland somewhere. You know, I follow him on Twitter. Like, I love him. And he did a really beautiful interview with Oprah for one of her Super Soul Sundays a couple of years back. But if you ever want to check that out, definitely check that out. So The Alchemist, the first book that sort of laid the foundation for me aligning with my purpose. All right. So the second book, who is my other literary crush, and all of my yoga students, or most of my yoga students at least, know this book because I use this book religiously. And so this book is called The Book of Awakening by Mark Nepo, who I love, 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 love. And this book is like pages falling out, highlighted, like, you know, tea stains from like having tea around, like it's just worn and torn and all of that. But I love, 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 love this book. And this book came into my life just as my life was really about to take a turn for the better. I was in a really just sad place, not so much dark as it was just sad, and just feeling, you know, heartbroken. There was like a period where I just broke up with David. This was 2012. And like, you know, I was miserable with my job. I was just like bursting at the seams with trying to figure out my purpose. I was in this car accident. So I was just like in this really, really, really sad place, not knowing at that point, when all of this was like, when I was experiencing all of this, that in just a few months, yoga teacher training would be finding its way into my life. So I was in this really sad, sort of like broken kind of place. And the Book of Awakening came into my life. And it was another book. I didn't hear about it as much as The Alchemist, but I heard about it just here and there, here and there. And then finally, it was either gifted to me or, but I should remember that, right? But it came into my life, and I remember the day when I opened up and read it. And the Book of Awakening is a book of daily passages. So January 1st through December 31st. And it's, Mark Nepo is a writer, a poet. And so it's like these reminders, right? Like just these different, he opens up passages with different quotes from different thought leaders and different, spiritual texts and things like that, or just different quotes from songs. And then he writes like a passage around the quote that he opens up with. And the passage is just, it's always just this very beautiful and gentle reminder that like, you're not alone. Giving you context around what it is you may be experiencing. Like it just was like a hug that I needed at that time in my life. And I fell in love with this book, and I told anybody who would listen, you've got to get the Book of Awakening. Let me see. I think I was teaching by then. When I started teaching, it was the book I would always read from at the end of class during Shavasana. So when I bring students into Shavasana, I always give them like a moment of silence to just settle in. And then I love to read a passage, a poem, just something while students are in that space of like ultimate reception and being, for these words to just kind of drift into the subconscious, right? And just be a place to reflect on, or to just be something that just sounds like a bunch of words and you let it go. But that's usually the secret to my sauce there. And then I'll be silent for a few more moments to just let it be like a true Shavasana. But when I started teaching, I would read from this book all the time. And I would always have students ask me, like, what is that book? What is that book? What is that book? And so in 2014, Oprah was doing this like tour around the country, the Live Your Best Life tour. And she was hitting certain cities, and DC was one of those cities. She had like 9 or 10 cities she was hitting throughout the country, and DC was one. And in each city, she was going to have special guests. So like, San Francisco would have had like Deepak Chopra, and New York City had like Elizabeth Gilbert, and And so we in DC, we got Elizabeth Gilbert. We had, I forget the other speakers, but I do remember Elizabeth Gilbert. But then at the last moment, there was an ad. And the ad was Mark Nepo for DC, and only in DC. I was like, oh my God. I was more excited to see Mark Nepo than I was to see Oprah. But I was super excited about the whole weekend. It was like a Friday evening through Sunday event because I was able to buy tickets for me and my mom. And, anybody who grew up with a mom who watched Oprah, like, you probably have always tried, like I have, to get her tickets on the Oprah show and always got met with the busy line, unless you were lucky to get through and get the tickets. So it was always on like my bucket list, like get mommy to see Oprah, get mommy to see Oprah. And here was my opportunity. And we went, and Mark Nepo was one of the speakers. And when he came out, I had tears in my eyes. I mean, you would have thought it was like, Michael Jackson back in the day, God rest the dead. But, yeah. And so I took my book with me, to the event. And I was like, mark my words, I'm going to meet Mark Nepo and I'm going to get him to sign my book. And I don't know how, but it's going to happen. And I'm taking this book with me. So like I said, it started on a Friday evening. It was like all day Saturday and then like a Sunday morning. So Saturday was the day Mark Nepo spoke. And he was meeting with people, but you had to have like the super duper, $1,000 plus VIP pass, which I did not have, So I was like, well, I'm still going to meet him. And so Gail was there, all Oprah's crew, like the people were there. And, this was in the convention center in DC, and so the Verizon Center. And so, Gail was like in a corner doing something. This person's, different stations, meet with Elizabeth Gilbert. And so I was just like, man, I got to figure out how to run into this guy. And sure enough, one of my yoga students who was there were a couple of people that I ran into, like, oh, hey, girl. And we were all there with our mothers, which was really beautiful. So one of my yoga students, Tammy, shout out to you. Tammy's the one who gave me the hashtag Tuesdays with Rachel. So when I market this podcast, I always use that hashtag. But Tammy was like, Rachel, because she was a student in my class. She knew how much I loved this book. She's like, Mark Nepo is down on like the 3rd floor, like in this corner, like he's just talking to people. You got to go. So I'm like, oh my God, thank you so much. So I take off flying. I'm like in my little shoes and my dress. And, I'm like, and I'm flying around the convention center trying to find him. And then boom, I found him, right? And yeah, he's there and a bunch of people are crowded around him, all the other fans like me, and he's talking. And then eventually, and Mark Nepo presents himself like he writes. He's this very gentle, like, being. Like, I haven't had a conversation with him one-on-one outside of me telling him how much I love him, but I haven't, like, so maybe he is loud and maybe he has this whole other side to him, but he writes softly and very gently, and he presents that way, like his voice, like he's just this gentle, like, presence. And so, so afterwards he gives room for folks to get their book signed, or because of course the bookstore's there, and every speaker who's at the, because it's a business, every speaker who's there, there's a bookstore and their books are for sale. So you can hear them, you can go buy my book, 25% off with the Live Your Best Life, code. So people are having their books, but I came with mine. And so finally, like, I got up to him and I said, I just want to tell you, I love you. He smiled. He's like, well, thank you. And I was just like, your book has literally been a lifesaver. But that's literally what I said to him. Like, I just want to tell you, I love you. And he took my book and he signed it. And it says, for Rachel, with many blessings, Mark. And I'm looking at that right now. And then I wanted to take a picture with him, but I was like, I didn't want to push it. You know what I mean? Because I'm like fangirling, but I didn't want to fangirl too much, right? And so I'm getting ready to like walk away, and I have like my phone in my hand, and I must have just looked like I wanted to like take a picture. So at this point, I've kind of, this all happened very fast. So I started stepping away. I have this look on my face, and this lady out of nowhere was like, "Hey, do you want to get a picture with him?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm too afraid to ask." She's like, "No, girl, go on up there, take a picture with him." So I was like, "Hey, Mark." And because I was still in the space, I was like, "Do you mind if I get a picture with you?" He's like, "No, it's totally okay." And so the girl, she has like an Android and I have an iPhone. So she's like, "I don't know anything about iPhones. I'm just going to use my phone." And she takes the picture. And so I'm like, well, shit, now she has it on her phone. So she's like, "Girl, what's your number? I'm going to text it to you." So I give her my number. She's like, "All right, I'm going to text it." And then you got to move on. You got to get out the space because everybody's trying to get in there, right? So it's like one of those things. And I'm like, what if she forgets? What if she didn't hear my number? What if she doesn't do it? What if, like, because that's where my mind goes. What if, what if, what if? And, maybe 30 minutes later, boom, this area code text pops up. I'm like, I open it up. There's a picture of me and Mark Nepo. So, and I got to retrieve that picture. I know it's on Facebook, but it's on like an old iPhone. So I know it's on Facebook because I know I posted it. I'm sure I got it like on an old computer somewhere. But man, that was a moment. So Mark Nepo, The Book of Awakening, amazing book, a beautiful book to, just read in the mornings when you wake up, to read throughout the day. If you are like a yoga teacher, or even if you're not a yoga teacher per se, maybe just not just a meditation teacher, but maybe you're a meditation teacher. Maybe you don't teach yoga, was what I was trying to say. Maybe you hold space, for women or for whatever it is. But if you do hold sacred space in general, this is a really, really, really good book to use and to share, with your folks. So The Book of Awakening, Mark Nepo. All right. So now we're going to get into some yoga resources. And this is for, primarily, I was thinking about my yoga teachers, but for anybody who just wants resources for their own yoga library. So maybe you've been practicing a long time or a short time and, teaching isn't for you, but you still want to have all the resources. So the Book of Awakening came into my life summer of 2012. Yoga teacher training came into my life October 2012. And this is where I could have pulled absolutely every single solitary book off of my shelf, but I picked four actually. And this was just like, okay, I'm just going to go with these. So the first book is by a yoga teacher and guide named Mark Stevens, M-A-R-K, Stevens, S-T-E-P-H-E-N-S. Mark Stevens has really amazing books on the art of yoga sequencing. So especially if you're a newer yoga teacher, or maybe you've been teaching for a while and you just need some inspiration, the art of yoga sequencing, or I don't have that book in front of me. I just remembered it. That book I have like stored somewhere. So it's either The Art of Yoga Sequencing or Yoga Sequencing. Either way, it's a really thick book with just the asanas, the postures, like breakdowns of different postures, different sequences you can develop for different audience, different lengths of time. Just really, really, really great resource for developing sequencing. So again, if you're a newer yoga teacher and you're just trying to figure out kind of how to put things together, because I remember that, like, sun salutations are wonderful because it gives you that series of postures to link together. But then, you want to put your own twist on it. You want to put your own, kind of flavor to it. And it's like, okay, how do I connect this to this and this to this? And it can take some time to sort of find that groove, And so that book, which my stepmother gave to me, I love you, Terry. She gave that book to me for Christmas one year. And, a really, really, really amazing resource. So Yoga Sequencing by Mark Stevens. I don't have this book in front of me either because there was a certain version of it that I wanted to bring, and I think I have it in storage too. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. That's how my yoga teacher taught us to say it. Patanjali. She would always like roll it out like that to make sure we were getting that long A. But the Yoga Sutras, I talked about that last week, sort of codify the philosophy of the yoga practice. And I have to check myself. I was so into my zone last week. The Yoga Sutra I kept mentioning, yoga is the cessations of the fluctuations of the mind. I kept calling that the first Yoga Sutra because that's the one that it just always stands out to me because of the fluctuations of my mind. But I went back and double checked myself and I was like, oops. it's the second Yoga Sutra. The first is about the introduction of yoga as a practice, of course. So I just wanted to check and correct myself on that. But yeah, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. If you are a yoga teacher, you've been through training, you should have that book on your bookshelf. If not, if you're a yoga practitioner and you just want to start to kind of get into the philosophy of things, the Yoga Sutras are a really great place to start. And you can find versions that have the Sanskrit translated and then really break it down in a way that makes it accessible, So yeah, the Yoga Sutras. And I cannot believe I didn't pull this book off the shelf, but it came to mind just now because I love this book too, the way I love the Book of Awakening. The Yamas and Niyamas by Deborah, I think it's Adelson. I'm trying to see the name off the top of my head. Addison or Adelson, but just look up the book, The Yamas and Niyamas, a small book with an orange cover. And it goes over, it's a book that discusses the first two limbs of the path to yoga. So I'm always saying how yoga is an 8-limb path. The movements are the third limb, not the first. The first are the yamas and the niyamas, our moral, ethical ways of dealing with ourselves and the world. And any yoga teacher will tell you, like, before you do anything or go deep in your yoga practice, like, it starts there. So the yamas and niyamas, excellent book to have as practitioner or teacher or guide. Excellent, excellent, excellent book. And so 2 other books I wanted to share. Another book that is completely falling apart. Pages are completely like detached from, the book binding, but Relax and Renew by Judith Lasater. And I referred to Judith Lasater maybe 2 or 3 podcast episodes ago when I talked about this restorative yoga workshop I took with her and her daughter. But I love Judith Lasater and I love restorative yoga. So again, this is a book that's really great as a teacher, as a student, It has different sequences for just the different stages, or different experiences rather of being a woman. So when you're on your cycle, if you're going through menopause, when you can't sleep, when you're pregnant, post-pregnancy, things like that. And then again, another book that offers like if you have 20 minutes, if you have 2 hours. And she really gets into like how to fold up the blankets and use a prop. So I don't know if Judith Lasater is like the queen of yoga blanket folding, but I do know like a lot of what I learned about yoga blanket folding came from her in this book. And again, my yoga teacher, Dana. So yeah. And if you are a student, like an avid yoga student or a yoga teacher, you know what I'm talking about when it comes to that blanket folding. So that's restorative yoga. And then another really great book is The Complete Guide to Yin Yoga by Bernie Clark. And Yin Yoga is a really awesome practice. I call restorative yoga and Yin Yoga like cousins. So restorative, they're both a practice in that you may go through like 5 or 6 postures at the most. You may even go through 2 or 3. Yin, you might get a little bit more, but with restorative, you could definitely do like 2 or 3 and have a whole 60-minute practice. But the idea is that you move into these postures and you just sit in the postures. And restorative, you use blankets and props to make it really squishy and, supportive and a place that you can just sort of sink into. And then Yin has just a little more spice to it, as Danae would say, a little more spice. So you're holding postures for a longer amount of time. So not sort of moving through and just holding for like 3 to 5 breaths, but more like a minute, 2 minutes, 7 minutes even. And it can be really deep stretching, hip opening, but it's a practice that helps you get into the fascia, like the really deep layers of the body where tightness can reside, tension, all of that. And it's a practice that really helps to get into that space, spiritually or, emotionally in our minds. It's a practice that takes us right up to the edge and just allows us to sit in that, right? And how do we sit in that space of discomfort and stuff, but discomfort with intention. So The Complete Guide to Yin Yoga, the philosophy and practice of Yin Yoga. So another great book that gets into like the why of it, the asanas, the breakdown, suggested practices, all that good stuff. So really, really, really great resource, again, for student and teacher. So now, man, I got to keep myself going because I got a lot of books to go and I'm looking at the time. So it was the yoga teacher journey where I landed, into purpose, aligned with my purpose. And it was that journey that facilitated me leaving the corporate world. And my same yoga teacher who I keep referring to, Dana, I love you, shout out to you, gave me this book for Christmas one year in let me look at the date. Did she date it? I shouldn't date it. Maybe 2013. I had it for a while before I finally whipped it out and decided to read it. And I finally read it when I was coming back from a work trip in San Diego. And I was at the height of my misery. It was the top of 2015. And I got 15 pages into this book. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm quitting this job. And 2 days later, I walked in and quit my job. Gave 30-day notice. So anybody who has worked with me in a mentorship capacity or just has listened to me for more than 2 seconds, The War of Art. And I have probably referred to this book already in 3 or 4 episodes, but The War of Art, Break Through the Blocks and Win Your Inner Creative Battles by Steven Pressfield. And this book is no more, I want to say, than 165 pages, really short chapters, but that just kick your ass into, being real with yourself, having honest conversations with yourself, and just really help you. It's another tool to help you align with your purpose, to stay in your purpose, to have conversations with yourself about your purpose. Like, what is that calling in your heart that you're ignoring? Have you given room for that calling, but you're sort of avoiding really jumping into it? So all of that stuff. So breaking through blocks, winning your creative battles. So even if you don't know what your sort of creativity is, so to speak, but you feel like there's something out there, because believe me, I know that feeling. This book is great just for helping you tap into that space. So for wherever you are, on the spectrum, just sort of tapping into things, or you decided to make this entrepreneurial leap, you're somewhere in between, this book is a great resource for every step along the way. So The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. All right, so these next 2 books, after, again, just kind of going through my journey. So after I quit my job, I had always had this intention. I was a criminal justice major in college, shout out to Temple University. And I always had this passion to advocate for prisoners' rights. And that was due to this class, a couple of classes I took with this one professor, Lori Pompa. I'll never forget her. Lori Pompa, if somehow you hear this podcast, you had a major impact on my life. And this is going back to 97, 98. So anyway, Lori Pompa, beautiful advocate for prisoners' rights. And so through taking her classes, I had always had this desire to want to do something. When I first moved to DC, I tried to find nonprofits, make the work happen, and it just wasn't something that panned out. So I was like, all right. And then sure enough, when I get into the yoga teaching world, I learn about the Prison Yoga Project. And I'm like, oh my God, there are movements out here to bring yoga to people on the inside. I want in. And so it took me some time to figure out how to connect, who to connect with, where to get plugged in. And boy, just the way life works. Again, going back to The Alchemist, nothing is coincidence. A sister I started following on Twitter, probably back in 2011. Stay connected on Twitter. Everybody started shifting over to Instagram. We followed each other on Instagram. We would message each other oh, one day we're going to meet in person. This sister quit her job probably around the same time I did. So we were kind of on the same path. And sure enough, she started posting that she's doing work in Rikers Island. She became part of a group called Liberation Prison Yoga out of New York, New Jersey. And she was doing this work, and I'm like, oh my God, I want to do that too. How do I get plugged in? And so she was pretty much the plug. The Liberation Prison Yoga was doing a training in December of 2015 in New York. She's like, come up for this training, stay long. So I came up, took the training, finally got to meet her in person, right? She connects me with the woman who started Liberation Prison Yoga. I'm hoping I'm not chopping up her name. Annika Lucas, I think her name is, but she started Liberation Prison Yoga. After the training, I go up and I have a conversation with her, and I'm just like, hey, like, this is awesome. I'm in Maryland. Like, they were doing work mainly in like New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. And it was like, how can I get connected in Maryland? Turns out she had trained under or worked with the founder of Prison Yoga Project, James Fox. And so she was like, yeah, I worked with him, and then I sort of branched off and did this here in New York, but you should connect with this woman in Maryland who also works with James, but I think she's doing work down there in Maryland. So she gave me Kath's email, Kath Meadows, who is another superhero in the prisoner advocacy world and just a great yoga teacher. She gives me Kath's email. I email Kath. Kath is like, and so we're getting to the top of like 2016. Kath's like, oh man, we're just about to have like teacher training, because if you want to work in the prisons, like, you have to go through this Prison Yoga Project training. So I signed up for the training. It was a couple months later. And then by summer of 2016, I was like shadowing her in a women's correctional facility. And so I've been doing that work since, just volunteering once or twice a month. Certainly things have been shut down since the pandemic. Behind the scenes, the group that I work with, we're trying to figure out, when we can go back inside, how we can get back inside. Are there different ways? Are there just online? Is there anything we can do to connect with the inmates? I don't think that they've even been able to see family. So not only, no yoga, no nothing, but no family either in this space of like no contact. So I think about them all the time. But during that space of training and just becoming familiar with working with the prison population, I was introduced to trauma-informed yoga. And so as a yoga teacher, you may have already experienced people coming to you and telling you how, because we know it's a practice that facilitates emotional release, but you may have had those students that come up to you or they're like, oh my God, like, this practice has really helped me with like X, Y, and Z. And so because we're getting into the body, and the body holds our total life experience, so the body holds the trauma that sometimes we think we fully processed, and then we get triggered and it just comes out of nowhere. As we're moving the body, students may tap in, to a space that they thought was healed or closed or done, so yoga is a practice that definitely can facilitate release and healing and all that stuff. But trauma-informed yoga is a practice that really helps you to think about the little things, how you say things, your words. I tend to say posture a lot instead of pose, because in one of the trauma-informed trainings that I took, particularly dealing with women who are survivors of domestic violence, the word pose can be triggering, because in some sexually abusive situations, a woman may have been told, or a man may have been told, I want you to pose this way. And the word pose can be triggering. So even something as small as shifting from pose to posture or shape, we bring our bodies into shape. I slip up and say pose all the time, but I am super mindful. You'll hear me say posture or shape more than you will hear me say pose. How you position a class, how you should always be facing the door. So all of these little things that are not so little, for the population you may be working with. And again, just being mindful of time and looking at the list of books I have left, I'm going to just kind of speed myself up. But 2 books that came into my life during that trauma-informed yoga training is Overcoming Trauma Through Yoga by David Emerson and Elizabeth Hopper. I love this book. Again, another book that's not super big. It's not super heady. It gives you sequences to work with. It gives you stories to just help you understand stories of different clients that were worked with in terms of understanding how trauma impacts the body or can sit in the body, and how this practice can really help bring that out and just bring people to a place to feel safe in their body again, because that's what can happen, especially with physical trauma. You don't feel safe in your body, but yet you're in it all the time. And so yoga is a practice that can really help to bring it all together and to feel safe again. And so, Overcoming Trauma Through Yoga by David Emerson. And then David Emerson, I believe, studied under or worked closely with Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score. Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma. So 2 really great books, again, for yoga teachers who are interested in trauma-informed yoga, or again, as a practitioner, if you just want to understand, the deeper levels of how trauma sits in the body. These are 2 really great books for that. All right. And then getting into yoga introduced me to Ayurveda. And I'm really going to make myself be honest with time here, because again, I could probably talk about Ayurveda for another 2 hours alone. But last year I completed a graduate studies, like a graduate certificate program in Ayurvedic wellness. So I'm now an Ayurvedic lifestyle consultant, an Ayurvedic wellness lifestyle consultant. That is like level 1. A full-on Ayurveda practitioner, which is like the PhD of like Ayurveda practitioner, I am not, but I can do general consult on like understanding doshas, finding a diet that's appropriate for your doshas, for your seasons, help you kind of find some imbalances you may be experiencing, things like that. But 3 books that I wanted to recommend for those who want to learn a little bit more about Ayurveda. The first book, Ayurveda, Nature's Medicine by Dr. David Frawley. David Frawley is definitely one of the premier scholars of Ayurvedic studies. And I love the way David Frawley writes. It's very easy, excuse me, easy to understand. It's not overwhelming. And so any book that David Frawley writes is usually a great resource. So Ayurveda, Nature's Medicine. Another book that I absolutely love, The Path of Practice, A Woman's Book of Ayurvedic Healing by Maya Tiwari. She is another prominent scholar and practitioner of Ayurveda. I believe Maya Tiwari's stories, she may be the first or one of the first women to be either honored or regarded, forgive me for not knowing the exact term, but for her knowledge of Ayurvedic study and being able to apply, to be a practitioner at the level that she is. She has a very big accolade, in that regard. But she also healed herself from cancer, using Ayurvedic practices. And so this book is sort of her journey of what she used to heal herself, and then stories of how she worked with other women. And it has like menus, for your doshas, for the seasons, different practices. It's just a really, really, really lovely book dealing with everything from sort of the philosophy of Ayurveda, if you would, to meditations, to actual nutrition and things like that. And then finally, The Yoga of Herbs, an Ayurvedic Guide to Herbal Medicine. And this is by David Frawley and Vasant Lad. Vasant Lad is like just another premier scholar. He writes a lot of textbooks about, he actually has the textbook of Ayurveda, volumes 1 through 3. So a lot of philosophy, practice, all of that. So the 2 of them together in one book is a great experience. But a lot of folks like to use herbal remedies, natural remedies, for teas, for healing, for manifesting. And so The Yoga of Herbs is a really great book that gives you sort of the Ayurvedic perspective of the herbs. So does this herb increase your pitta? Does it decrease vata? Does it balance kapha? All of that, and how they can be used, when they should be used, things like that. So really great book for those that want to get into herbs more, and then who might want to understand sort of, the Ayurvedic aspect of that. All right, I got to keep myself going. Probably hear books falling all over the place. Okay, now these next 3 books came into my life really between 2019 and last year. And I just felt like, I want to grab these. I want to share them. 2019 introduced me to this book called How to Breathe by Ashley Neese. There was somebody, I think it was a trauma yoga account I was following or I am following on Instagram. And she posted this book. The person who manages that account posted this book and a picture. And I was just like, oh my God, that book just looks so lovely and inviting. It's like a small, like hardcover book. And I love the title, How to Breathe. So I ordered it right away just because I loved the way it looked. But it's a book of 25 different breathing practices, very simple practices to support deep sleep, to support intention setting, to support waking up for the day, forgiveness, just all different aspects of life with your kids. And again, it's another book that incorporates, the practice of breathing, the author's story. I love anybody that kind of just weaves in their story and then just guides you into the practice, because that's how I do. So How to Breathe by Ashley Neese. Really, really, really beautiful book for self-taught breathing practices. Really great book for working with students and clients. It's just another tool that can be used when working, especially with like privates and stuff. So that's a really good book. Two other books of passages that came into my life last year, Prayers of Honoring Grief and Prayers of Honoring Voice, both by Pixie Lighthorse. And so these are not so much daily passages as they are different passages just dealing with like different aspects of life. So honoring acceptance, honoring restoration. Prayers of Honoring Grief deals with different aspects. So like letting go, maybe dealing with death. So not just grief in the sort of death sort of way, but just grief in terms of that emotion and how to manage the different aspects of grief. But they're very beautiful passages that I read, say at the end of a meditation or again at the end of class. I have read, I think, a passage or two on this podcast. And then Prayers of Honoring Voice the same way. Prayers of Honoring Voice, like what's one of them, like honoring risk, honoring love, So she also has another book in this collection. It might just be Prayers of Honoring. I haven't gotten that one yet, but these two books really, really, really great in terms of books for reflection and things like that. So this would go in the category with like the Book of Awakening and Journey to the Heart, which, I always read from. I was saving that one for last. And then finally, two books that I have yet to read cover to cover, but I've nibbled through them. I always have them on my bedside. I take them everywhere with me when I travel because I always have the intention of digging through them, but I'm just like, I will get through them as I get through them, but they are always by my side. Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. Women Who Run with the Wolves, you probably heard of this too. So this is your loving reminder to get closer to nibbling through it, maybe finally cracking it open. And if you've read it, shout out to you. And Sacred Woman by Queen Afua. This is definitely a book I want to go through cover to cover, but I have used it for just different practices and insight. But this is a book about, it's a guide to healing the feminine body, mind, and spirit. So yeah, Sacred Woman by Queen Afua and Women Who Run with the Wolves. I just felt compelled to, because I take these books with me everywhere, to share these. So these are really good books for self-healing, inner reflection, and just for supporting your life as a kick-ass woman. So yeah. And then last but not least, as I said, saving the best for last, although all of these are the best. But I saved this for last because it will transition us into me closing out this podcast episode of resources. So Melody Beattie's Journey to the Heart, Daily Meditations on the Path to Freeing Your Soul. Melody Beattie's another one that feels like her book is another one that feels like a really big hug. And I definitely have hope and intention to meet her one day. This book is really powerful. Again, another January 1st through December 31st book. But I don't know her full life story, but as far as this book, she lost a son. She had a son who passed away. And this book was like the journey of her coming back into life. God forbid, I have not lost a child. I don't know what that feels like, but I can only imagine, and so to find her way back into sort of the living again, this book is like her journey with that. And she went to different spiritual places like Arizona, New Mexico. She went to different places. And this book is just a reflection of like experiences, journeys, people she met along the way. So just a really, really, really beautiful book. Again, that came into my life maybe 2018, 2019. And it's the only book that I was willing to put the Book of Awakening down for and choose to read from. So let's go ahead and settle in for the passage for today. I certainly do hope this episode was helpful, beneficial. There are lots more books and resources I can recommend. So if you have questions about, tools that you were looking at, tools that you have, now that I'm saying tools, I'm thinking of like the yoga toolkit. So there's just so many books I could recommend, but always feel free to contact me offline, rachelvossyoga.com, or find me on Instagram at rachelvossyoga, and we can talk more about resources. But hopefully this episode just gave you some books to look into, to consider, to pull off the shelf, because I definitely have books that I buy because I'm like, I'm going to get to them one day, and they just sit on the shelf. So if any of these books I mentioned are books you've been contemplating pulling off the shelf, then let this be your sign to go ahead and pull those books off. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and find a comfortable seat, however you are. If you're in a chair, maybe bringing your feet to the floor, resting your hands on your thighs. The palms can face down for grounding. If you're lying on your back, maybe bending the knees, you can bring the arms in any form or fashion that feels good. So maybe out to the side like a tear, resting your hands on your belly. And whether sitting or lying down, just feel your shoulders drop down. If you're sitting, lengthen your spine. And if you're lying down, just feel the spine release into the earth. Close the eyes if that feels good for you. Take a deep breath in. Exhale, full breath out through the mouth. And just feeling yourself settle in. And this passage is from today, April 19th. Again, reading from Melody Beattie's Journey to the Heart. And it's called Release Old Emotions. And I'm just going to get a little flashlight here. Our emotions and experiences sometimes lead us out of the present moment. Something happens. Someone says something. We hear something. And a feeling crops up. Often, underneath it is an old feeling, a feeling from the past, an old chunk of energy that's hidden in our soul, stored in our body. We aren't off track when that happens. We're right where we need to be, off center and out of the present moment. We can use moments like these to heal ourselves. Let yourself feel the feeling. Let yourself release the energy. Talk it out. Jog it out. Do what your heart leads you to do to release that bubble of emotion from your soul. Take as much time as you need, an hour, a day, a month. When it's gone, you'll find a surprise. You've advanced on your path. You've learned something new. A new cycle has begun. An issue arose that provided an opportunity for healing and growth, and that healing and growth turned into a pleasant and welcome surprise. Yes, sometimes experiences lead us out of the present moment, but if we stay present for ourselves, we'll always come back, changed, lighter, healed, and more ready to love. All right, my love. So again, I do hope this resource episode was beneficial. One other thing that just popped into my mind that I meant to grab was a deck of oracle cards. So if anybody likes to work with oracle cards, where you pull a card maybe for like a message for the day, you can do like a 3 or 4 card spread to get some insight around something you're contemplating in your life. It's also another tool that's nice for students and clients to work with. But the deck I've been using recently is called the Native Spirit Oracle Card Deck by Denise Lynn, and I love it. My students love it. So if you're interested in oracle cards, or you're wanting to add to your, oracle card toolkit, that's a good deck to have, the Native Spirit. So with that, lovelies, let's go ahead and close this out. As always, may you be happy. May you be free. May you be peaceful, easeful, useful, and joyful. The light in me honors the light in each of you. Thank you for joining, and I'll see you next week.